Well, thank you very much. Wrong side of the UK, but a bunch of Liverpudlian drunks. Won't hurt. At least they're within my age bracket. So, good morning, everybody. By the way, I haven't got a peculiar accent, you do. So let's just start on that perspective. If you don't understand anything, it's probably because I've got it wrong. So what I'd like to do now is give you a viewpoint of the future, a vision of the future of where we think the pharmaceutical industry is going. This is based on my own research from a consultancy company that I used to be in charge of called PricewaterhouseCoopers, a minor player in the consulting leagues since I left. And of course there's no arrogance there at all. And if there was anybody from PwC here, there would have been something soft and smelly thrown in my direction. So I want just to ask you all to think forward 10 years. For those of you having trouble with that, it's about 2027. And just think about what your workplace is going to be in 2027. Now, we're not very good at thinking forward, so one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, looking at the age of this audience, it could be a bit of a struggle for some of you. How about thinking back 10 years? Let me ask you all a question. Were you all working 10 years ago? Okay, who wasn't? Who was still studying? Good. Okay. So, for those of you that were studying 10 years ago, what was the capacity, memory capacity of your cell phone? What was the battery life? Okay. Let's go back 20 years. So some of you were still in your cribs, so don't worry about it. I want you just to think about back 20 years, 25 years. I can see just from some of the grey hairs in the room, some of you are going to be like me, you can go back 40 years. 40 years ago, who had a computer at work? Who had a mobile telephone? Okay, why am I talking like this? Because the issue that you've just heard from the CEO of DNAnexus is what's happening in the future. How do you prepare for the future? What does the future bring? And how do you and your organizations be ready to collaborate and work together in the future? And one of the issues I think you have is the first thing you've got to do is start with looking at the industries you serve, the patients you're looking to serve, and look at what they are going to be doing and how that future is going to impact them 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now. In ice hockey, they have this great statement, always make sure you're where the puck's going to be, which I think can be quite painful if you're not looking. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that's what we have to do. That is our job as leaders of the pharmaceutical industry, leaders in healthcare, providers and service providers to healthcare. We have to take a look at where that future is going to take us. So with that, what I'm going to try and do, I hope, is give you some insight into that and paint a picture. Now, let me assure you that it's not always right, because if it was, I'd have a rather large yacht out in the ocean somewhere and avoid paying tax in any jurisdiction. So let's have a look at the future. So if we look at the global pharmaceutical market in 2015, it was about $1.2 trillion. What's it going to look like by 2020 and beyond? It's going to be over $1.5 trillion. So this is still an industry that's enjoying growth, and it's enjoying a lot of growth and a lot of demand. The amount of money, say, that we make from selling medicines today is rising. What we are predicting is that the world market for medicine will double over time. The issue is what areas of medicine are we going to see that doubling in, and how's it going to happen? And I guess that this room's somewhat biased in the area of what I would call precision medicine. and the area of understanding genetics and genomics, pharmacogenomics, and understanding the patient in detail. But I can assure you also that that probably is not the bulk of where medicine is practiced. But it will be, frankly, for the industry, the pharma industry, where their future lies and where a lot of the high-value treatments will start. And I think eventually they will become the mass treatments as medicine changes. But it's a long journey. So let's, so the pharma industry is growing. It's not growing equally across the world. And in this area of Europe, which used to be known as the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain, until I had a Portuguese lady write my slides, and then it became the gyps. The issue you've got here is that the markets across Europe, for instance, are shrinking in value. And they will continue to shrink as, quite frankly, the patent cliff emerges and generic medicines start becoming the volume that have come through. So it's not that there won't be any less medicine, it won't be that there's any less healthcare. In fact, there'll be more, but the issue will be that the value of the medicines prescribed are going to be less. Because, let me be quite clear to you, a medicine that's lost its patent protection is still a good medicine. It might not be in the lead marketing person in your big pharma company's view a good medicine anymore because it doesn't drive their personal bonus. But for the patient, it still is a good medicine. And there are plenty of great medicines out there in cardiovascular, respiratory, diabetes, etc., that will be out there 20 years from now. Because unless this industry proves that it can provide better, more effective and cheaper treatments in the long term, they're not going to substitute them. So what is driving this? And I can assure you what is driving this is an older population. You can see the figures up there. 13% of the population, I haven't touched a thing, 13% of the population by 2020 are going to be over the age of 65. Shall I move over to this one? And what I want to do is give you a viewpoint of what that's going. So dementia doubles in its incidence every 5 years after your 65th birthday. So for somebody in their 60s, this starts becoming a worrying issue. Obesity. Well, first of all, 100 million Alzheimer's sufferers by 2050. That starts to be a very worrying number. And quite frankly, the reason that's a worrying number is because we can't afford to treat or deliver social care to 100 million Alzheimer's patients across the world. We do not have the infrastructures to do so. Obesity. By 2020, 12% of the global population will be overweight, 44% of the diabetes burden, 23% of heart disease, and 40% of certain cancer burdens are linked to this. Cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, all of these are increasing maladies in the world and increasing with age. If we look at the medicine in the States, you'll find that very many medics will tell you, well, cardiovascular disease, we've got it beaten. You know, in general, we are very good at treating and delivering good medicine for cardiovascular disease. How many of you visit China? This is the interactive bit, right? So for those of you that visit China, let me ask you a question. What is the fastest growing disease in China? Cardiovascular. Do you know that they have now identified plaque in vessels of 7-year-old children in China? Why? Why is it happening? Well, quite frankly, it's happening because the social changes that are coming with wealth, change of diet, sitting in front of computers, playing on them all day, and delivering a completely different type of lifestyle. There is an epidemic of cardiovascular disease in China. So where we think that medicine is a uniform delivery across the world, it just isn't. And therefore, delivering services, products, and understanding how you're going to treat the global population requires you to understand the nuances and understand the details across the world. So if you're in marketing, let me assure you that this is quite a good message, because quite frankly, here we have a whole world of older people who are living a lot longer with chronic diseases that used to kill them. So in other words, your job is to keep them alive, fat and happy on your medicines. I want to teach you a new word, Honda. How many of you think that's a four-wheel vehicle? Okay, so a Honda is a hypertensive, obese, non-compliant, diabetic, asthmatic. Now, if you're a medic and one of those wanders into your surgery, that's jackpot time. Now, they're not normally all comorbidities in one individual. However, when you look at what's driving the costs of the healthcare systems across the world, 70 to almost 80% of healthcare spend is on Hondas. So Honda is something you want to manage aggressively if you're a payer or you're a provider, because this is what's driving your costs and who you have to deliver the vast majority of your medicines to. And healthcare payers and providers are doing all they can to curb their expenditures, curb their bills, because their resources are finite. Even in this world's largest economy, your resources are finite. And the Affordable Care Act, or I always think of it as the Not Affordable Care Act, even with Mr. Trump's continued messages, this is still not solving the problem, and nor will it. Take it from somebody that comes from a country which has had socialised medicine, which is called no health service, or no hope of service, the NHS. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at an organisation with over 100,000 employees, it's never enough, and it never can be. So what's going on out there in the world? Well, there's a lot of pressures from the regulators to deliver ways to manage that healthcare bill. In Germany, we have AMNOG. In the UK said actually 3 years ago they're going to introduce compulsory value-based pricing on all newly licensed drugs. That was 3 years ago. They're still thinking about it. And the reason they're still thinking about it is, one, there's no legislation that allows them to do it, and two, when NICE, I'm sure you know what NICE is, it's a nasty organisation, NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, could not deliver, if you like, a system which could withstand challenge from the pharmaceutical industry that would be fair in how to price medicines. And if you look at France, Canada and Japan, and countries all across the world, there is huge regulatory pressure to manage what's coming and how much it costs. And not only am I talking about clinical efficacy and safety now, I'm talking about value for money. So we're moving. We're also moving at what we spend money on, and we are spending a lot more money on generic drugs, because, quite frankly, the patent cliffs come, and what we're replacing generic drugs with are not being taken up across the world and are not being seen for value for money across a lot of the areas. And healthcare payers have given us all a very strong message, and that message is extremely clear. It is, unless you give us a medicine that's clinically and economically better than what's already available, we're not prescribing it. We're not changing our therapeutic pathways unless you prove the patient is going to respond to this medicine, especially if it's expensive, unless you can prove to me that there is a genetic reason or a genomic reason why to change from one to the other. We're not moving. So there is a very clear message that's come out from there, and that message is you have to prove that you're providing us with more value. And in the mature markets, you can see that that is happening in the way industry, payers, providers, and service providers to the industry are having to work. People are demanding more value for money. Another interactive part of the audience. How many of you have taken a drug that didn't work? Honestly, how many of you have taken a drug that didn't work? Yeah? How many of you went back to the pharmacy and asked for your money back? How many of you went back to the medic and said it was no good? One or two. I notice a medic did. So, how many of you have bought products? Yeah, how many of you bought a cell phone or a computer which didn't work? Yeah? How many of you just ignored it, carried on? So why are you doing it in medicine? Think about it. Why are you doing it in medicine? Why are you doing it in healthcare? How comes we are charged with and can deliver the fact that we get service that doesn't work, we just say, oh, it doesn't work, we won't go back. We won't deal with it. It's just an observation. So let's move forward now and take a look at some of the other things that are going on here. This has lost the top of the screen, but basically this is a slide looking at the growth markets across the world. And within the growth markets, what you're finding is that the growth markets have grown from around $250 million, and they're going to get to about $500 million by 2020. This was given as a real industry uplift. In 2013 to 2015, when pharma companies were asked, what are you doing about the patent cliff? How are you going to mitigate the issues of loss of revenue? They said, the growth markets will rescue us. I don't see how a 250 million uplift in a 1.6 trillion market rescues an industry. The only rescue in this industry is going to come from R&D. What's important about understanding the growth markets is that they come with enormous challenges: geographic size, underdeveloped infrastructure, fragmented distribution systems, weak regulations that are ineffectively enforced. All of the world's pharma industry worked in China. There was a way of doing business. One day, it changed. No warning, pharma industry executives were in jail. And it didn't change across China. It changed in some big cities, but it stayed the same in smaller cities. This is what you're working with. Any of you done business in India? Any of you moved product in India? Physical product? As you move from one state to another, you cross a state boundary, it's a tax event. Doesn't happen elsewhere in the world unless you cross countries. These sorts of things you have to understand as you're delivering medicines. Patients in the growth markets can't afford costly biological medicines. And what this slide's telling you is, if you look at the US, the average spending in 2010 on all healthcare was just over $8,500 a person per year. So say 10 to 15% of that was on drugs. About $1,000, say. Now look at India. The average total healthcare spend was $54 a person. 10% on that drugs, $5 a person a year. How many costly biologics do we know that are $5? What's the size of the market there for personalised medicine in India? What will it be? How long is it going to take to grow? What do you think it's going to be in China? Where do you think it's going to be in China? So the issue is that it's not that the Chinese market's not interesting, it's that you can't take a global view of the Chinese market. There are more dollar millionaires in China than there are in the whole population of people in Belgium. So there are millions of dollar millionaires in China. The issue is, where are they and how do you access them? And if you're a pharma business or you're providing healthcare provision, you need to know where that is, because otherwise you're getting lost. When you do have good medicines, the issue you have is the way we bring them to market. And of course, when you bring a good medicine to the market and it has a biomarker, and you can prove that the patient is going to respond well to that medicine, you get prices, as shown here, around $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a treatment. So this is very important area to understand. So as we bring biologics to market, whether it be Erbitux, Perjeta, Tasiva, Xalcori, Zelboraf, and a whole host of others that are coming through or already just come through, what you've got is a medicine where you can prove the value and you can prove where it's going. So therefore, the challenge, I believe, for R&D is to lead that change. R&D can create the key to the future by focusing on value for the patient. And that is where we have the issues, because at the moment R&D productivity has declined or remained the same for over 10, 15 years. We've had a whole set of problems in R&D with this. And one of the issues you've got as you look forward is healthcare is now unsustainably consuming a larger share of GDP in rich and smaller countries alike. And we just cannot afford to continue delivering medicine in the way we deliver it. So let me be very blunt. You can't eat what you like, drink what you like, smoke what you like, play whatever sport you like, and expect somebody else to pick up the bill. Where does the pharma industry come? It comes in delivering a different type of medicine and changing the way we deliver healthcare. And I believe that the pharmaceutical industry has a key role in supporting the delivery and, if you like, the gestation of how medicine evolves in the future. This is that graph of doom. Nothing much has changed in the number of new medicines we bring through the regulator over the years, except the cost line, which is continually going up. So who do you think the best salesman in a pharmaceutical company is? Matthew, who's the best salesman in a pharmaceutical company?
The one that brings in the most business.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's the head of R&D. He's managed to flog 10 to 15% pay rise and increase in his budgets for the last 20 years. And get away with it. Well, they haven't all got away with it. In fact, a lot of them didn't get away with it. But what has happened overall is the industry continues to spend more money in R&D in major pharma. Where it spends it on, what it spends it on, and how it spends it is what we now need to see. So this little graph basically is, my view is that we've done all we can driving R&D productivity, extending patents, reducing costs, and pushing the present market model. And I think our future for the pharma industry is to use a new lever, or lever in your terminology. And that is basically to understand the outcomes that the new medicines we are bringing to the market deliver. So the issue for you, in order for you to understand the value of your medicine and the understanding of the healthcare you deliver, is you have to prove the outcome. What do you get from the drug, and how does it deliver better healthcare to your patient? So what do you do and how do you do it? Well, in R&D, in health economics and in marketing, the first thing you have to do is work together. Now, this is always an issue. The most conservative being on the planet in the lexicon of Arlington is a phase 3 clinician. How many phase 3 clinical investigators do you know? How many of you think that they would change the way they run their trials. Alter the clinical trials forms. Decrease the number of parameters they look at by 50%. Make sure that every single patient is working with a biomarker and a genetic information inside their trial, obviously where it's relevant. To me, they're the most, if you like, conservative individuals that I've ever met. No change. The answer to any change is, can't do that, the regulator says so. Take it from me, someone who has known Janet Woodcock for 25 years. One of Janet's biggest moans on this earth is nobody comes and asks for change. Nobody comes and suggests different ways of doing things. It's become a standoff between the regulator and change and industry and change. Now I'm going to, after Honda's, I've got another little one to teach you. Outcomes proof equals price. If you prove your drug produces a superior outcome, you'll get price. Let's turn it around another way. No outcome, no price. For me, that's a fundamental mantra of anybody in R&D in the pharmaceutical industry. You can't prove outcome, you don't get price. Full stop. So spending $2 or $3 billion bringing a drug to market that's not going to get a price probably is not a career-enhancing step. So let's just look at what needs to be done, because as prices compress and market access barriers escalate, there is a need to elevate and rethink outcome strategy in order to demonstrate market value. And this works right the way through from evidence-based outcomes in clinical trials, phase 2s, phase 3s, and demonstrating relative product value, which impacts the price. So I'm not now just talking about as you bring new medicines to the market, because as your competitors bring new medicines to the market and they start proving that through a diagnostic marker that they have in distinct patient cohorts superior value to the drug you've already got on the market, your drug's going to take a hit. So for you sitting, if you like, happy with a great biologic out there in the marketplace in oncology, for instance, thinking that it's the be-all and end-all, if your competitor comes out with a different marker and a better outcomes analysis, you are knocked off your perch. So it is not good launching it and sitting there and not collecting evidence as you go forward. So it's not just about phase 2s and phase 3s. You need to be collecting and understanding health economic, phenotypic, genomic data as you go forwards. So what does that mean? It means, by the way, in different countries, they will have different requirements. You will have to prove different things in different countries to enable market access, get reimbursement, and stay on the market. It therefore means as you go into other countries to address this growing need for outcomes data, you're going to have to proactively change your behaviors and establish new relations externally to your pharmaceutical company. And as you heard earlier, one of the biggest issues you've got is if you're a pharmaceutical company, this is horrible data because it's not your own. It's not designed and designated in exactly the way your IT gurus told you it's got to be done. It's dirty data that comes from other places. It could be in other countries. It has completely different structures than the ones you deal with. You've got to collaborate. One of my messages to the pharmaceutical industry at board level, quite frankly, is really simple. Collaborate or die. Your choice. But you can't do everything yourself. The world has got to a point where pharmaceutical industries can't do everything themselves. So today it's all about the regulator. The regulator has to move us and get us to a position whereby we can start working globally, swapping information between one another and move into a different regulation, a regulatory environment. We've got to converge on safety, and we have to facilitate a global collaboration. It's beginning to happen, but I can assure you that this is still a journey measured in decades. We need a new regulatory environment. We need new auditing bodies and processes. Collaboration's vital. No single entity can go it alone. And therefore, that requires us not only to regulate across the life cycle around access and transparency and delivering value for money, it's all about us having the skills and resources inside our own businesses, but more importantly, inside the regulator. And that doesn't exist today. And we're going to live in a sea of data which has to be interchangeable and used by others. It means we have to change the way we research for leads and deliver our new molecules inside R&D. There has to be a change in R&D. Collaboration within the industry, academia, and other new entrants. Deeper understanding of therapeutic areas. So we have to change the way we search for leads, and we have an increased focus on genomics. But let me just take you through this slide. 94% of companies invest in personalized medicine, so they tell us. 80-odd% of companies have partnerships in personalized medicine. 50% of today's trials involve collection of DNA samples. 30% of companies require a biomarker for all compounds in development. So, why is it that there are only 10% of compounds in phase 2B to 4 that have a companion diagnostic? What happened to the other lot? This bottleneck seems to be a continuing bottleneck. It seems to continue and not drop through. Now, none of us have got a God-given right for a biomarker with to the drug we are developing. If nature says there isn't one, there just isn't one. But the issue we have is that the industry is not delivering it all the way. Change is underway in R&D. All companies tell us they're investing in R&D. And if that's the case, then frankly, what we have to do is we have to start understanding what's going on. I want you to understand this point here, which is, if you look at emerging markets investments in China and India, there are more PhD chemists coming through in India than in the whole of Europe. So where do you think the focus of the pharmaceutical industry might come? It's a massive challenge. Where's our biomedical funding going? There are significant changes in our funding. There's a reduced science investment in the United States. There's a massive push to globalization. You are seeing lots of money spent in China and India. Do I think that that's the new market next year, in 5 years? Do I think that's where the pharma industry is going? No. 10 years, 15 years, your guess is as good as mine. So, technology will drive the benefits to the industry and alter the way we go to market. Rather than me take you through that, I'm going to let you read it very quickly, but in essence, what we're really saying is that there are massive technical advances that have happened that we could leverage. A lot of excuses are made around us not leveraging them due to regulatory bodies. You can't move the data from this country to that country, etc. I would suggest to you and to all of us that the integration of the data, using technology to understand things, is going to help us build clusters of products and devices that will revolutionize the way the industry works. I am sure that you've all understood and followed the wireless patient monitoring, smart chip sensors, etc. So I just wanted to take you through a little scenario. A biosensor that can record everything you do, work out how many calories you've consumed, and so at midnight when you open up the refrigerator to go and take out that snack that you haven't earned, the house alarm sounds. So you don't just wake up the family, you wake up the street. Think about it. Now, how many of you think that technology is not possible? So that technology is there today. Everything around biosensors and chips and apps basically allow us to now have a single interactive home device that will capture and record all of our data. So the issue is, are you going to allow it, and where are you going to allow it? And frankly, there are a whole bunch of new entrants that are going to change the status quo. Vaccines, regenerative medicine, human-computer interfaces, a whole set of things that change things. What I wanted to just show you very quickly was some research from Tufts which show that a shift from basically doing everything yourself in the pharmaceutical industry to academic industry, patient groups, consortia and private providers, outsourcing providers and payer industry. All these consortia are building now. It's a massive increase that the industry's never seen before. The integrated pharmaceutical company, the FIPNet, is a thing of the past. They are starting to collaborate. Not fast enough, not effectively enough, but it's happening. So therefore, what you're now seeing is a whole bunch of companies working with a whole set of foundations and different governments. And that is where the industry needs to move to. It needs to move to private partners, and the bottom line on that, quite frankly, is integrated strategic partnerships that will allow stakeholders to spread risk, leverage knowledge and resources, and offer the best hope of delivering tomorrow's medicine. I'm not going to take you through all these. I'm hoping that you'll have them on a website available. But just to prove to you that the top 10 pharma companies do alter over time, there's a change of ranking of the major pharmas. There's a ranking of the major generics companies. Teva, number one, Novartis. Not many people realize Novartis was number one or number two in world generics businesses. 10 years ago, only one large molecule was in the top 10 largest selling drugs. There's now 6. So the pharma industry needs to change. Data's key. And the final message, before I get thrown off the stage, quite frankly, is the growth of the aging population is driving healthcare costs. The need to prevent disease or cure disease rather than palliatively treat disease is the change that the patients, providers and payers need to deal with. We need significant cultural and socio-political changes for this to happen. It's not just going to happen by osmosis. There needs to be active intervention. Thank you very much, and any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Mike. Great, well, thank you very much. Maybe we'll do one quick question if anyone has it. It was a tremendous, comprehensive overview of the industry. I really appreciate the global perspective, the reiteration of the challenge that I've heard. I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago with Bernard Munoz where he was describing the continued high cost of pharma innovation despite all of these advances, and the hope that with the leveraging of technology intelligently, we can really finally start to make things more efficiently. Any quick questions before we go on to the...
Where do you think the idea of real-world data or real-world evidence plays in all of this?
It's a great question. I must admit that the whole world, real-world data or real-world evidence, is, I think, a great definition. But I've never found non-world data. So, any of you got Martian data? That would be good.
Musk is working on it.
So look, the bottom line on this is it's absolute. So real-world data, real-world evidence is an absolute essential component of outcomes data. You can't drive real health economic understanding without real-world data and real-world evidence. But we don't have a comprehensive, if you like, set of standards, understanding, way of collecting, way of collaborating to ensure what we have is interchangeable or interoperable. But in my view, the whole issue of real-world data, if you like, real-world evidence, is key to the future of the whole delivery of the ecosystem of healthcare. Because otherwise, we don't know what we're delivering. We just don't. We can't price it, and we just don't understand it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time and your expertise.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.